Welcome to The Place Inside with Laurence Galian. That's me. An incredible archive. A spiritual arsenal, really, with over 30 episodes. This is episode number 35. At least, that's what we're calling it. The Place Inside is the place where we change consciousness. We change the consciousness of space. Of course, you know, most of physical reality is so-called, quote-unquote, empty space. It's not empty. It's filled with consciousness. We condition rooms with our consciousness, our apartments, our work environments, and our towns. We work directly with higher, unseen beings. Thousands of people are listening to these podcasts, and many are writing to me privately about how these podcasts are changing their lives. So I want to continue making them for you. We have no religious agenda. Wherever wisdom is found, we will go. We have traveled to many dangerous cities and countries in search of wisdom. We do have an agenda, helping you to activate the ultimate potential of the fully actualized human being. I have been studying ufology since the 1970s, when I was first introduced to the book Incident at Exeter. That's about 40 years of study. During that time, I've had two amazing encounters with UFOs in the presence of another person and confirmed by the witness. I have taught metaphysics for several years at the Hofstra College of Continuing Education in Hempstead, New York, before moving here to Mexico, where, as you know, the skies are filled with UFOs. In a previous episode, I talked about a giant UFO that flew over my apartment here and then back and forth over a mountain range near my home. Zecharia Sitchin said something astounding. This is what he said, quote, "I'm asked, do they look like us? And I say, no, we look like them. They made us through genetic engineering. They jumped the gun on evolution and made us to look like them physically and to be like them emotionally. That is what the Bible says. Let us make the Adam in our likeness and after our image, physically, outwardly, and inwardly. So much of what they are, we are," unquote. Those words by Zecharia Sitchin had a big effect on me. I want to share with you some great news. New Falcon Publications has asked me to write a new book about Aleister Crowley. Crowley has fascinated me since the mid-1980s. As you know, he had a direct encounter with an extraterrestrial by the name of Lam. I always thought it was fascinating that these are my initials, Lawrence, Anthony, Michael. I am doing what are called morphogenetic, quote-unquote, constellations to get spiritual guidance regarding how this book wants to be written. I'm also excited that New Falcon has re-released my first book, Beyond Duality, The Art of Transcendence. I wrote over 50 new pages of magical techniques in the new edition. Please, I ask you to support our work and purchase a copy from New Falcon, but make sure it's the new edition. Let me tell you something controversial. This has been hinted at. but it is politically incorrect. I am not afraid to say it. Anthropologists have been looking for the quote-unquote missing link for a century now. Let me tell you something that has apparently eluded these scientists. We are the missing link. We came from somewhere else in the galaxy. As most of you know, last year I almost died. When I was in a coma in the hospital last November of 2012, I experienced a near-death experience. I had a deep belief that 2012 was going to be a year of great transformation, but I really was shocked by what I went through. I traveled from a heaven-like place and from there to hell, and then back again to heaven. During my sojourn in hell, I had to go through repeated and complex sacrificial rituals in which I sacrificed my existence so that others could live. My memories of what I experienced are crystal clear. These were not dreams. The detail was amazingly vivid and powerful. In fact, I am amazed at how detailed these experiences were. Some lasted 4 hours or more. In the first heaven experience, I composed music. I played the piano. I had an incredible music video anime tour of the Art Deco design of the Empire State Building in New York City. But in the hell experience, I was subjected to the worst tortures imaginable. Besides the nightly torture experience, I was also subjected to hours of interrogation and psychological testing. This leads me to believe that since my physical body was weakened, my spirit became weak, and therefore I was able to be attacked by certain enemies who do not want me to speak to you. Talk about life review, where you are given a chance to review your life. Well, it's true. It's just not like in some Hollywood movie. In my experience, I had friends from my past gather together with me during my quote-unquote life review. They all talked about our experiences together. I felt a lot of love, a lot of companionship. One feature of the life review that amazed me was the emphasis on objects and possessions. It is remarkable how much we are attached to the things we quote-unquote own. My friends brought all sorts of objects that I had given to them, shared with them, or owned myself. Part of my life review experience was to give away everything I owned. This is very similar to the process that's given in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. No, I didn't meet Jesus at the end of some tunnel, but I did have a very powerful spiritual experience. Let me explain. My wife, from whom I'm separated, brought to my hospital bed an MP3 player. She put the headphones on my head and played for me sacred chants from holy traditions. Immediately, my torturer in my own private hell lost all power over me. I laughed at him, as I knew he was completely impotent and no longer could hurt me. He looked at me, realizing that he lost all power over me, and then he just walked away. When I am truly on my deathbed, I hope someone reads the Tibetan Book of the Dead to me. If you haven't read it or heard it on YouTube, please do so. It will amaze you. Such a sophisticated guidebook to the other side has never been written. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is read out loud to liberate those near death. Well, we are all near to death. We could die at any instant, even if we're in perfect health. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead is read to liberate the listener from suffering forever. It is amazingly sophisticated and describes in great detail every single step that happens to the individual when he or she makes his or her transition. Now, in 2013, I'm working on a book describing the stories of my quote-unquote heaven and hell experiences. This is a slave planet. There are all sorts of electronic control mechanisms. We have control numbers. We call them social security numbers. In the old days, slaves were literally branded. However, try to live in the United States now without a social security number. We have telephone numbers, driver's license numbers, passport numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers. I could go on and on. We've lost our humanity. Money does not exist. It is only numbers in a computer. People, likewise, do not exist. We are also just computer data. Even the word computer is getting old. As slaves, a huge portion of the United States population are working for 10 cents an hour in penitentiaries. Certainly, many of these people belong in prison, but what about all the victims of the draconian Rockefeller marijuana laws? What about all the people who stage peaceful demonstrations for which they are arrested and jailed? What about chain gangs that you see from time to time along the highway? What about the innocent people in Gitmo? And what about all the thousands of guillotines and millions of coffins that have been ordered by the United States government? Don't even start me talking about waterboarding. There are much more serious forms of torture which we have been prohibited from learning about that are taking place in secret locations all over the world. Custodians, or some call them watchers, have been forcing us to live in cities, in an unnatural state which we call civilization. They use fear to keep us in the state of slavery. When I travel and I fly over various parts of the world, not that I'm rich, I went into huge debt to do this, but when I have traveled, I see gigantic tracts of good land that is absolutely empty. Sure, I know the population of the world, but there is still plenty of space for humanity. If only humanity wasn't afraid to live off the land and live a more natural existence. The transition to a way of life that is closer to nature is already starting. If you rely on money from the government, say a pension, a portfolio, and so forth, I recommend that you begin studying ways that you can become self-sufficient. Just pretend to yourself that this government money does not exist. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become a farmer and plant beans all day, but it may mean that you need to learn a trade that will be helpful to human beings in general. For example, metalworking, hunting, training horses, leatherworking, storytelling, carpentry, self-defense techniques, animal husbandry, and yes, if you are called to it, farming. Excuse the sounds outside. You know I'm in Mexico. It can be very loud here. Anyway, you don't have to panic and make the transition tomorrow, but you do have to start learning and practicing now. Buying lots of gold is not going to do you any good, believe me. How are you going to protect all that gold? I have lived in countries where there is a lot of grinding poverty, and the criminals are very intelligent and very dangerous. If they know you have gold, you are in big trouble. That said, you might also consider living underground. There are many people who are buying military installations or facilities that have been decommissioned and are now for sale. I know a very famous author who I can't name right now who lives a very great life in a missile bunker. The guy he loves electronics, and well, he's in heaven right now, living in this bunker with all this great electronic equipment. But real new archaeological evidence now shows us that ancient Europe had a complete system of tunnels that stretched from Scotland all the way to Turkey. Can you believe that? Great minds are attesting to the truth of this extensive system of tunnels underneath all of Europe and the Near East, including the great writer and thinker, a person I admire tremendously, Joseph Farrell. We know just from the Vietnam War that a fully developed culture can live in tunnels. So you don't have to buy an ex-military facility. You can build your own, and relatively inexpensively. 100 years ago, scientists and metaphysicians talked about something they called ether. They believed that ether, or something called Akasha, interpenetrated all of space and matter. But in the 20th century, scientists, quote unquote, disproved this theory. Now, however, the great thinker Nassim Haramein is introducing us to the concept that the universe is 99.9999% space, and in that space is information, and that information can make DNA. Nassim Haramein states that the human being is the event horizon, the place where the infinitely large and the infinitesimally small meet. the quote-unquote emptiness of the universe is filled with wisdom. Phi ratios are found everywhere in nature. Fibonacci sequences are found in our fingers, our veins, our bodies, even at the atomic level. The great composer Jonathan Goldman's music CD entitled Tantra of Sound Harmonizer is based on the Phi ratio. He changes consciousness with his music. He has also worked with the divine name Yod-He-Vav-He, or Yahweh, as well as the Tree of Life. Now, if you put photons into a room, they will assume a random position. However, introduce DNA and all the photons will be absorbed by the DNA. The DNA actually captures the photons. Remove the DNA and the photons will still remain in the shape of the DNA. This is called the DNA phantom effect. Has life come to Earth as resonance of photonic DNA propagating throughout the universe? Nobel Prize winner Dr. Francis Crick claimed it was statistically unlikely that DNA spontaneously appeared on Earth. Crick discovered that it is impossible for DNA to evolve randomly. The figure is so astronomical for DNA to evolve through a Darwinian process that it's totally absurd. I suggest DNA was deliberately brought here. It would have been too fragile to survive arriving by meteors or asteroids. Aliens are not quote-unquote alien to us, but a part of who we are. We have the ability to send and receive photons. There is a wave that makes the DNA out of what was previously non-living material. The DNA code surrounds us at all time. Occultists have called this the etheric body. It's also called the template body or the plant body. We've spoken about this in previous podcasts. Now, the etheric body instructs or shapes the physical body how to organize itself. It's like a blueprint, a template. Our energy body, our etheric body, can power supernatural experiences. I will say that again. Our energy body can power supernatural experiences. We can project energy out into the ether. We are part of this ether. We can shape the space-time holographic medium in which we live our daily lives. In fact, believe it or not, we may not be living on Earth at all. Some cutting-edge scientists are saying that what we call humanity exists in a state that is billions of light years from the Milky Way. In fact, humans may not look at all like we imagine them to look, as our brain formulates our pictures of people. The morphogenetic field contains all the information to make dolphins, mice, rats, plants, snails, you name it. This field is called by some the source field, others call it the subtle field. In other words, we used to think that when we unravel the DNA molecule, we would find out that the DNA would have all the instructions for building each part of the human body. In fact, it does not. What makes an arm an arm? What makes a foot a foot? There is an information field that contains this information, and this information is more subtle than the physical world. However, when I say it is more subtle than the physical world, it is actually more real than the physical world. DNA is directly influenced by intention. DNA is a self-healing mechanism. Approximately 15% of DNA damaged organisms heal themselves on their own without any other assistance. Now get this, when DNA is brought close to very young and undeveloped cells, the DNA takes the energy from these cells. So, what is my advice to you? Go out into nature or grow sprouts in your home, and the DNA from these germinating seeds will feed your DNA. This is based on solid scientific fact. Of course, cells can age or experience stress. The DNA usually fixes this. DNA self-perpetuates itself. Think about it. Science is new, but our bodies have been around at least 200,000 years, and that's a conservative estimate. I have always been fascinated by subtle energy. I have traveled quite a bit, as you know. I've been to sacred energy sites all over the world. I've been to Ireland, Turkey, Bulgaria, Colombia, Azerbaijan, Great Britain, France, and many other power places. Subtle energy is the energy that makes things happen. Energy contains information, just like the morphogenetic field. Subtle energy we cannot measure by scientific equipment for the most part at this time. However, we have definitely measured a person's weight before they died and then immediately after death, and definitely discovered that a certain weight has disappeared when a person makes his or her transition. The conscious mind possesses, or I should say processes, information very slowly. But the unconscious mind processes information at a super rate of speed. The conscious mind handles about 50 bits a second. The unconscious mind handles about 50 million bits a second. Therefore, it is no wonder why people ask why ceremonial magic works. It works because it engages the unconscious at a profound level. The way to engage the unconscious is through beautiful, fascinating, highly emotional objects, experiences, music, artwork, and so on and so forth. Think of a little baby in a bassinet. Think how the parents place one of those mobiles over the bassinet. You know, those mobiles that spin around and are filled with these shiny, pretty little things. They spin around and delight the eyes of the child, and sometimes when the child is old enough, the child puts them in his mouth or her mouth. You must do the same now as an adult. If you want to contact your unconscious, you must entertain it. You must get its attention. We perceive very little energy. For example, our eyes only perceive 2% of the light spectrum. Most of what we perceive as reality is really only about 2% of the full picture. The unseen portion of reality is comprised of subtle energy that holds a powerful influence over the physical world. We can learn to tap into this energy and use it for healing and manifestation. Now let's go back to the Sumerians. We still don't understand the Sumerian way of thinking. Get this, over 10,000 clay tablets from Sumeria still are untranslated. One big reason they are untranslated is not because we don't understand their language, but because we don't understand the way they thought. Epigenetics contains all our ancestors' memories. I coined this term over 40 years ago. People had no idea what I was talking about. I even made up a business card that said Laurence Galian, Epigenetics. Today, epigenetics is also called the morphogenetic field. Now, this is extremely important regarding the morphogenetic field. Listen closely. If your parents, relatives, or ancestors murdered anyone, committed any kind of terrible violence, and so forth, this affects you. Psychic vampires do exist. Do you know a guy or a gal who just depresses the shit out of you? I think we all have people in our lives that we've met that are like this. When you talk to them, all they talk about are their problems. When you talk about problems, you create more problems. But worse than that, these people do not take any advice that you offer. They profoundly want to feel depressed and believe that life sucks. And suck they do. They suck the life energy out of you. Stop trying to save these people. They will betray you and they will hurt you. Certain paranormal beings attach themselves to these people. These paranormal beings do not eat food like we do. They eat energy. They eat your energy. So beware of the man or woman who walks around with a cloud over their head. And for that matter, stay away from bars. Why do you think they call alcohol, quote unquote, spirits. Stay away from these parasitic, depressed people. I'm not saying don't help friends in need, but I'm talking about these people who you know just love. They are in love with being depressed. We must first become aware that we play a role in how our life unfolds. Get this. Let's change the information in our subtle energy. Instead of sending bad information out like, I want to marry another abuser, let's come from a place of gratitude, of joy. We become healthier. We get more promotions. We see the connections between things. We start connecting with people and not the disconnections. Do you tell yourselves that no one is going to like you? Start telling yourself, quote, I am a radiant child of eternal light. I see the divine power shining from my eyes, unquote. Write this on a piece of paper and put it on your mirror and say it over and over again throughout the day. I promise you, you will be amazed at the results. I have actual testimonials of people who have changed their life around completely just doing this simple mirror work. The morphogenetic field affects our income, and our belief affects the morphogenetic field. Our ancestry profoundly affects us. Our karma affects us. However, you have the living divine dwelling inside you, and you can command whatever you want to happen. Quote-unquote family constellations was invented by a man named Bert Hellinger, a fascinating guy, kind of a person who is controversial. There's some things I like about him, some things I don't, but he combined African shamanism with morphogenetic theory along with several other healing modalities. Of course, Rupert Sheldrake, the greatest scientist of our time, has done the best and the most work on the morphogenetic field. In fact, as many of you know, his recent presentation on TED Talks was so controversial that TED Talks removed his video. There was a huge public outcry. An entire team of the world's greatest scientists came to Sheldrake's assistance. Now, they didn't all agree with Sheldrake, but they agreed with his right to speak his mind. You see, when TED Talks removed Sheldrake's video, TED Talks said that their scientific board found scientific errors in his speech, and they listed those reasons on their website. So these scientists who came together to support Sheldrake disproved one by one each of the TED scientists' points. Sheldrake's video was remarkable. It marked the end of materialistic scientism. Materialistic scientism is over. While TED Talks removed the remarks of their scientists from their website, very interestingly, they never restored Sheldrake's video. However, you still can see it on YouTube. I highly urge you to go watch it. Of course, after listening to this podcast, you have literally no idea of how powerful you are. Your abilities are infinite. Read Ernest Holmes' book, Science of Mind, and really study his theories presented at the beginning of the book. Now, the quote-unquote Shroud of Turin that many of you know about proves that the subtle physical energy can imprint on anything. It is a kind of electrical energy. It is what is called in the Tibetan tradition the rainbow body. Have you noticed that often street lights go out when you pass by them? Did you ever have that experience? Or have you ever noticed things like lamps or guitars and other things will just spontaneously fall over? Your energy is discharging all the time. I myself often, just purely by accident, shoot powerful electrical energy discharges into other human beings. Contact extraterrestrials through your crown chakra. This makes contact with cosmic energies. The cosmic energy descends into the body all the way to the perineum as the human being incarnates. Then our job is to send the energy back up from the lowest chakra all the way up to the cosmic chakra, the crown chakra. This is the path of the Kundalini. The Kundalini is the galactic dragon of travel. Harness its energy. Ride the dragon. Unfortunately, most gurus and yoga practitioners spend too much time and energy talking about the upper chakras. Actually, most yoga practitioners nowadays are really just aerobic instructors. But I'm talking here about real yoga gurus. However, all their talk about cosmic bliss does us no good when it comes to putting a roof over our heads, paying our debts, fixing our plumbing, making love, demonstrating our willpower. In other words, they avoid talking about the lower chakras, the base chakra in the perineum, and the sexual chakra. The sad result is that so many gurus and yogis become victims of their uncontrolled sexual and power impulses. How many stories have you heard about spiritual teachers who fell into sexually abusing their devotees or having a harem of wives? If you never deal with your primal energies, you will have to face them in one way or another in your future. Now, faith healers work. Why? Because of something called the placebo principle. Science should deeply study how simply the act of belief can literally change the DNA, the cells, the immune system of the human body. Here is something super cool. Stress is the greatest enemy of the human being. I tell you directly, you must deal with your stress now, or you are going to get sick, your life will suck, and you will not fulfill your quote-unquote true will. There is a book called The Healing Codes that you should buy. Or else, if you don't want to read that, simply sit for 20 minutes, morning and evening, in a comfortable chair and think about nothing. No big deal. Just sit for 20 minutes. It doesn't take much work and the results are so powerful. The greatest hypnotist of all time, Milton Erickson, he told someone who had the most profound problems. He told him, go sit in a chair, he told him, for 30 minutes, just every night, and don't do anything. He didn't even tell him, don't think about anything, or no instructions whatsoever. He just said, sit in a chair for 30 minutes every night. Well, it was incredible. Within a few weeks, this man came back completely transformed. So I'm asking you to simply sit for 20 minutes, morning and evening, in a comfortable chair, not laying down in bed or you'll go to sleep, and just don't think about anything. If any thoughts come, let them come and go. No big deal. Quote, I sing the body electric, unquote. The Long Island poet Walt Whitman wrote. Many of you know that I grew up on Long Island, actually in a town called Hicksville. The body is definitely electric. In fact, the heart broadcasts a greater electromagnetic field than the brain. Now, for a moment, think about colors. White and purple are spiritual colors that are good to wear when doing spiritual work. A person reveals a great deal about their inner feelings, their inner psychology, by their hairstyle, the clothes they wear, the type of shoes they wear. Do they wear tennis shoes? What kind of shoes do they wear? And the style of their clothing. I am not saying that you need to go out and buy designer clothes. I abhor that shit. What I am saying is that you need to think about how you manifest yourself. You are a work of art. Make your whole life a work of art. Make your whole home a work of art. I know two wonderful, beautiful women who have actually cut out collages from all sorts of magazines and pasted them all over their walls. So every single wall in every single room of their house is filled with the most magical pictures imaginable. Lots of psychotherapy, lots of reading, seminars, lectures, and so forth are completely useless unless you have some kind of integrity within you. How do you achieve this integrity? Get to the root of the situation. A quote-unquote family constellation will help you to see the dynamics at work in your contemporary life, in your life right now, and in your past. Also your future, too. No one in a family constellation is going to lecture you or tell you what's wrong with you. It's not like therapy. In fact, you're not even supposed to discuss what happened for 2 weeks after the family constellation. It's called a quote-unquote family constellation because you are morphogenetically linked with every ancestor and with every member of your family, with your mother's mother, your mother's mother's mother, so your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your great-grandmother, and the same thing with your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather and your great-grandfather, reaching back into time immemorial. Just like a living chess game, during a family constellation, you can see the participants. They are called representatives, forming various shapes. They stand in various places in the room, or lay down, or move, or say things. They engage in various activities, and you yourself can draw your own conclusions. There is never any compulsion to reveal what you perceived or experienced. In fact, the facilitator of the family constellation asks as few questions as possible. Energy doesn't lie. People can lie, but energy cannot lie. That's why family constellations are so powerful. And I urge you to try them. They're happening now all over the world, and there are people, practitioners, people who are learning family constellations, so you can participate very inexpensively if that is an issue for you. Humanity is a hybrid race. Many beings evolved with us here on Earth and under the Earth. We are made up of at least 12 races. Interestingly, according to morphogenetic field theory, as soon as there is one form of being, beings of this form will appear throughout the Earth and hence throughout the cosmos. So it is no surprise that the universe is filled with human-looking extraterrestrials. Many ET races have many agendas. Many of them have very good intentions. The government is planning to do certain things with human DNA. Now, two paths are emerging. The robotic Superman versus what I call the true activated human being. The robotic Superman is a merging of man and machine. In other words, a cyborg. The robotic Superman is going to use AI, artificial intelligence. The wealthiest elite of the world, starting in about 2015 and being completed in 2045, will have artificial brains, bodies, and the ability to translate their consciousness into these things. Bill Gates has stated that he does not believe he is going to die. But their mistake is that they plan on transferring their consciousness onto a computer chip. Would you trust anyone who has control over that chip? Today, you might trust someone who controls the chip, but what about 200 years from now? Androids are already visiting the planet. Take the propaganda machinery called Hollywood. Watch how they show the half-man, half-machine cyborg creature. The power global elite is preparing us for this eventual reality. but it is a joke, let me tell you. Look at how we portray men, for example. First, Hollywood shows us the alpha male, Bruce Willis, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then they introduce the man who is the total wimp. If you watch carefully, you can see in television commercials men being literally struck by their wives. I'm talking about hit by their wives. If you don't believe me, watch TV for a day and you will see wives mocking and striking their husbands. The global power elite is deliberately confusing us. Deliberately confusing us. We are time travelers. That is our nature as human beings. We are just unaware of our powers. That is why I talk about the fully activated human being. We are unaware of what we are doing every day. We have all the same powers as all the rest of the ETs. We embody all their powers and are just as powerful as they are. Therefore, there is nothing to fear. Many quote-unquote scary UFO abduction experiences are intimately connected to the government. You know this. Often abductees report seeing military men during their abduction. Some, like Whitley Strieber, even swear that they remember men implanting him. Many of the true ultra-terrestrials are multidimensional, from different universes, parallel universes, and planes of existence. We are arrogant to think we know all the planes of existence. Yogis, Sufis, Kabbalists, Tibetan masters have been teaching us for years about multiple planes of existence. Other extraterrestrials are simply us from the future. The question becomes, who are we? That is the biggest and most important question. The artificial intelligent people do not believe in a soul. How can they translate an essentially infinity into a machine? I really do not believe that you can take your consciousness and put it into a genetically modified artificial body. It's essentially a scam. These people have a profound fear of death. That is why I urge you to explore the Tibetan Book of the Dead to calm your fears. Evil of its own has no power. It is only a negation. Nature will take care of evil in its own time. Quote, evil contains within it the seed of its own annihilation, unquote, says Michael Tsarion. The single largest factor affecting humankind is amnesia. We have all inherited a collective trauma. Human beings are zombies. We are stumbling around traumatized. We are anxious, fragmented, and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The global elite wants us traumatized. They want us fragmented. We are easier to control in this anxious psychological state. We are a civilization suffering from amnesia. The politicians, economists, the military, and especially the power elite, the Bilderberger Group, DARPA, Council on Foreign Relations, NSA, and so forth, make use of humanity's collective unconscious anxiety. There is something called the quote-unquote Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe you've heard of it. I myself was a victim of this, but that's a story for another time. The Stockholm Syndrome is when, for example, a kidnapped victim begins to identify with his or her captors. Well, many human beings are falling into that category. Many Americans are totally behind their controllers. They move around like sheep and call this wandering around and chewing their cud patriotism. They will not even question the official story. For them, there is no alternative to the official story. People obey the media and the decision makers. By that I mean the secret operatives. Except for you, my listeners, people are not open to the other possibilities. Only the official explanation is accepted. Now, David Icke mentions that George Orwell, who wrote the famous book 1984, was trying to warn humanity. However, he says that Aldous Huxley, who wrote the book Brave New World, was not writing a warning for humanity. He was writing about the plan for humanity's future. Read both of these books if you haven't already. Ayn Rand, someone who I greatly admire, said, quote, "In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that can profit. There are two sides to every issue. One side is right and the other is wrong, but the middle is always evil," unquote. Moral relativism is taking over people's fundamental sense of right and wrong. To me, it's a way of chickening out. Excuse the expression, but most men no longer have any balls. People love watching horror movies. Why? Because we remember that at one time, life was truly horrible on planet Earth. Humanity suffered from real nightmares during its history. Why do you think the number one prescribed drug in the United States is Valium? Why do you think there are so many antidepressant commercials? People are walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder. However, they are not aware of anything happening to them. But their unconscious mind is aware. Their unconscious is scared to death. And the unconscious controls your life. One way or another, the unconscious will express itself. Just because individuals like Jacques Vallée and the great psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung point out that UFOs may be a projection of the human mind, a projection from the consciousness of the planet or from humanity as a whole, does not mean that they are not also physical phenomena. There is a point of intersection between the realm of the psychic and the realm of the physical. Terence McKenna called this meeting place Neverland. Richard Shaver and the late and great Mac Tonys turned me on to something interesting. The so-called interdimensional beings could be a species of intelligent non-humans or cryptoterrestrials who covertly share our planet with us. Because aliens are typically described as bipedal and human-like, it suggests to me that some of them may have developed here on Earth. Notice I said, quote, some of them, unquote. This would also tie in with Sheldrake's concept of the morphogenetic field. Now, as an expert on Islamic Sufism, I was initiated into a Turkish Sufi order from Istanbul in 1981. I know something about what are called the jinn. According to Middle Eastern teachings, jinn can be good or they can be evil. They can believe in God or they can go over to the dark side. They can go to heaven or they can go to hell. They even served King Solomon in building the temple. In an amazing act, the jinn literally carried the Queen of Sheba along with her royal throne all the way from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. Now, the Quran teaches that there are two sentient species on the earth, humankind and jinn. Regarding the aliens' reported hybridization program, we could be dealing with something beyond the understanding of our neurological hardwiring. Throughout the Middle East, there are numerous tales of jinn and humans interbreeding. Many men have taken jinn wives, and many women have taken jinn husbands. Might this be more than a folk tale, but actually a type of hybridization that we do not yet understand? As they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. Anthony Gucciardi has stated that Monsanto is creating a huge number of chimeras. Chimeras are a genetic combination between animals. Monsanto really, according to some, is above the law. The most controversial chimera is a combination between ape and human. Biotech scientists are already creating genetically modified humans. In Britain, they have thousands of human chimeras. Another type of chimera is what is called the spider goat. Spider goats are being produced because they weave bulletproof silk. DARPA is working on superhumans that can regrow limbs on the battlefield. They are combining insect genetics with human genetics. Monsanto's approach is just the beginning, believe me. Gucciardi believes that Monsanto will fall within 5 years, and other companies like Dow AgroSciences and DuPont will take over. The mad scientists are hard at work behind the scenes, creating monsters, as we argue over the admittedly important issue of Monsanto seeds. But while we are discussing these horrible Monsanto seeds, these mad scientists are hard at work creating monsters that we cannot even imagine. Now, it's very fascinating that Monsanto serves their execs organic meals. I bet they don't feed them GMO food. Bill Gates is a big stockholder of GMOs. Some of the world's most powerful GMO groups are meeting now on a private island, and they are making the Bilderberger group look like small peanuts. We are worshiping genetics. This shows that these people do not have any belief that spirit can influence our bodies. Think about Bruce Lipton's work showing how our beliefs can influence our genetics. But people are having drastic operations based on genetic markers. They are lopping off their breasts. It is the divine that decides which sperm enters the egg. Okay, I want to repeat that. It is the divine that makes the decision which of your sperm enters your egg. Okay, this is true empowerment. Chopping off one's breast is not empowerment. For thousands of years, we have been in a masculine paradigm of enforcement. However, one of the worst and most despicable attacks on the feminine has been the destruction of women's trust in Mother Nature herself. What about alternative therapies? What about natural earth healing? The global elite is attacking women using the information they have secretly gathered on humanity over millions of years. Are we going to let these corporations tell us what to eat, what medicines to take, what operations we need? They sell products detrimental to our health. These genetically modified foods give people terrible cancer. Some people fear aliens abducting them and experimenting on them. Yet mad scientists are experimenting with our health every day in our local convenience store. How seemingly innocent, yet truly deadly. A biotech scientist that must remain anonymous, or else we will encounter huge lawsuits, says, quote, "It is awesome that GMOs are killing off people because the population is too big. People are using up too many resources. If there weren't GMO foods, then people would use up the world's resources," unquote. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that frighteningly horrible? Now, UFOs can literally do anything. They can appear any way they want to, with all sorts of super physical powers, and in almost every imaginable shape, known and unknown to humanity. Let me ask you a question, and I really want you to think about it. Can you recognize an alien if one was in front of you? We resonate at different frequencies. Human bioenergy can power up aliens. Physicality is a relative thing. Humans resonate at a similar frequency. If we were resonating at a different rate, we would slip right past each other like ships in the night. Dr. Rebecca Wright speaks about something she calls exoconsciousness. She maintains that it is time for ufologists to complement their commitment to the analysis of UFO sightings and government intelligence with an examination of the activation of human consciousness via extraterrestrial visitation. The primary quest in her exoconsciousness field of research is, how does extraterrestrial contact affect human consciousness? Well, we know they desperately tried to stop both World War I and World War II. However, it goes much deeper than that. Think about the world's super great geniuses. I'm talking about the women and men who changed the world. I won't bore you with quotes, but so many have claimed that they received their ideas, their inspiration from extraterrestrials. Science is on borrowed time. Soon they are going to have to address many subjects. For over a century and a half, they have hidden and repressed the evidence. For example, the evidence of giants. The archaeological evidence for giants in America has been covered up. Stonemason and historical detective Jim Vieira studies the ancient ceremonial structures of North America, including mounds, walls, and star cities, as well as the archaeological evidence for giants that existed in ancient America. I myself had the good fortune of visiting some magnificent mounds just over the border from St. Louis in Illinois. Regarding giants in America, Vieira explains that while searching through old town histories in Massachusetts for information on stone structures, he stumbled upon remarkable accounts of anomalous human skeletons being discovered. According to the reports from the time, the skeletons ranged from 7 to 11 feet tall and had skulls which sported double rows of teeth. Quote, "There are thousands of these accounts," unquote, Vieira said, quote, "by doctors, scientists, anthropologists, archaeologists, farmers, and over decades and decades of time all around the country," unquote. These skeletons, he added, were often found within the mysterious stone mounds and sometimes were buried amongst great treasures. Vieira attributed the suppression of information about the ancient American giants to the Smithsonian Institute, specifically their first director of anthropology, I'll do my best to pronounce his name, Alice Hidreka, described by Vieira as a, quote, pre-Nazi eugenicist, unquote. Hidreka allegedly censored reports of giants and marginalized them from the historic record in order to depict Native Americans as, quote, unsophisticated and uninspiring, unquote. Additionally, Vieira reported that there are many accounts of Smithsonian representatives traveling around the country to where these anomalous remains were discovered and, quote, taking the giant skeletons away, never to be seen again, unquote. Ultimately, he contended that the cover-up continues to this day and claimed that a video presentation on his findings was pulled from the internet because it threatened the scientific orthodoxy. Ancient humans lived 300, 400, 700 years or more. Many were gigantic. Some were as tall as 40 feet in height. Yes, there was a period a couple of hundred years ago when people were deprived of proper nutrition, proper vitamins, and they shrunk in size. But this was only a blip in the history of humanity. Of special interest is the fact that the ancient Sumerian gods and goddesses, as well as the ancient Celtic gods and goddesses, were huge, at least 3 times the height of the average human. You can see in the Sumerian carvings how much larger they were than the average human being. But they were not immortal, and yet their progeny still walk the earth today. But are they walking on top of the earth? Where are they? I strongly suspect that they are underground. What are all these strange noises we've been hearing for the last 3 years? I believe it is government digging on a massive scale, going profoundly deep into the earth. The White House itself goes down 17 levels, and that's just the White House. Academics, scientists, and museum curators have repressed a huge amount of evidence. For example, evidence of a race of human-like beings with greatly elongated skulls and enormous brain power. The evidence of nuclear warfare taking place in ancient times. The presence of the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, proving the existence of a world beyond physical death, and the evidence of systematic visitation by extraterrestrials since the dawn of humanity. Regarding the elongating skulls, 3 things deserve mentioning. 1. Fetuses are being found with elongated skulls, proving that these beings were not subjected to skull binding, which is the process of squeezing the head of a growing child with boards to shape it in a certain way. 2. The brain capacity of these beings with elongated skulls is vastly greater and superior than the brain power of the average human being today? And 3, why would people who did practice skull binding want their children to have elongated skulls? Obviously, they saw this as representative of the way their great gods looked. For instance, consider the Egyptian pharaohs. And then also look at the horrible god Baal. Also the gods of various South American peoples and the Easter Island statues. Elongated skulls are found in South America, Sumeria, Mesoamerica, Africa, and Egypt. I was mentioning the great evil god Baal. He had an enormously long and extended skull. Many of the people depicted in these sculptures and reliefs sat for their portraits, just like in more recent times when famous kings and queens would sit and have their pictures painted. Tell me, what parent alive would want their quote-unquote normal-looking child depicted with a gigantic head if that is not exactly the way they looked? Think about it. It makes perfect sense. Definitely, people bound the heads of their children so that they resemble the gods. Humans naturally had elongated skulls at that time, and their brain power was immensely greater than that of humans today. They had 300 IQ. The Huffington Post has done a story about these skulls. This is not some fluffy science. Joseph Stalin himself investigated UFO crashes and fossils of aliens. They found what they called the Siberian rocket. The rocket had Sanskrit writing on it, shades of the Mahabharata. They were not normal terrestrial humans. So who were they? Were they the offspring of the gods and earth hominids? The children of Baal and human women became the Illuminati. They still exist today. Some believe that the fungi inherited the earth. Many aliens, especially those called the Nordics or the tall whites, easily pass as average human beings. They could be infiltrating every level of human civilization and mating with human men and women. 7.83 is the Schumann resonance. That is the vibration, the natural vibration of Mother Earth. If you want to become enlightened, buy yourself a psychotronic machine with ear clips and set it to 7.83 hertz. Keep this on for at least 6 hours a day for as much as 6 months to a year, and you will be amazed at the results. This I have done myself. Now, let's talk about bacteria for a moment. Bacteria are amazing things. They are found in nuclear reactors, okay? Where there's a huge amount of nuclear radiation, the bacteria are living and thriving. Bacteria are also found in the dust of galaxies. They are found in lava flows. where the temperature is great enough to melt rocks. Interestingly, the particles of dust in the galaxy are 70% hollow on the inside. It makes you think. The sun is beaming forth microbes all the time. Microbes are coming off of all the stars. Perhaps these stars contain the codes of life. The global elite put you into fear. Almost everyone's credit card is maxed out. People lay awake at night worrying and sweating over how they are going to pay off their credit cards and their second and third mortgages. Many people have lawsuits coming up where they have to go in front of a jail, in front of lawyers, and argue their cases about why they haven't paid their credit cards. Then in come the negative global elite who wants to be seen as your heroes. You unconsciously send them energies because many people see them as their protectors. They see them as their saviors. Remember how Obama tricked everyone. George Bush Sr. used a huge amount of mind control, more than any other president. Many psychic friends of mine had very strange quote-unquote dreams in which Bush Sr. appeared as a kindly and friendly old man. Where did these quote-unquote dreams come from? Well, loving energy can heal yourself and the world. Loving energy sends the photons back into your DNA, and enough of us do this, we can stop the suffering of the world. As we mentioned before, negative people can literally make you sick. Scientists have shown that cells of a placenta that are sent anger kills the placenta cells. But if you feel love and send love to someone, you can heal your own or someone else's DNA. A great Sufi sheikh stated on the record that we can directly affect our DNA using divine God names. All throughout the world, there are these divine names for the divinity. When we pronounce these names, I'm not talking about reading the names, but pronouncing the names, we are vibrating air molecules. Air molecules are part of the physical world. Therefore, we are bringing these divine names into manifestation. Second density protons contain the information and affect physical matter and transform it into life. After my hospitalization last November, I was told I needed a major operation on my skin, which would have sliced off a huge portion of my body. Frankly, I'll share this with you. I had a stage 4 bed sore, which means the bacterial infection goes all the way through all the layers of the skin, all the layers of the muscle, all the way down to the bone. Not to mention that the surgery would have cost a fortune. However, I refused the surgery. Instead, I turned to the science of mind, and I knew the perfection of my being. Today, my skin is 99% healed. My real doctor, not the monster who wanted to cut me up, but my rheumatologist, who is really a beautiful human being, is literally amazed at the rate at which I healed and how well I healed. Love opens up your DNA to the photons of the field. Heroes receive a great deal of public energy of DNA. Our DNA can electromagnetically teleport itself. Recent scientific studies have shown that through photons and water, DNA can appear throughout the cosmos. In South America, there was a great teacher named Viracocha. Strangely, he was very Caucasian with a long flowing beard. And as you know, the indigenous peoples of South America, most of them cannot grow long beards. Statues depicting Viracocha are seen up and down the west and east coast of South America, which means that he literally traveled all the way down to the bottom of South America and then all the way back up top. There is archaeological evidence of giants who had walked the face of the earth many millions of years ago. Some reached the height, as I said, of 40 feet. However, this evidence has been rigorously suppressed by the Smithsonian Institution and other scientific academic groups. Skeletons exist in abundance, but you will never see them because they are hidden away in the basements of the world's museums. However, the global power elite is not so powerful to be able to control museums in such places as Peru, where the naturally gigantic skulls of human-like beings are still being displayed. You can still go and still see the evidence with your very own eyes. Also, if you enjoy research, there is a lot of information on microfilm from newspapers from the 1800s. Of course, the professional debunkers have worked hard to make fun of such newspaper articles. Nevertheless, brilliant humans existed at that time who did amazing archaeological explorations. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, still have not been completely released in their entirety. Nevertheless, they do definitively describe the existence of extraterrestrials on Earth. Many extraterrestrials look so similar to human beings that they do not need to disguise themselves at all. Their job is to raise the awareness of the people they come in contact with. Other more negative extraterrestrials do believe in genetic manipulation and what they call upgrades. They want to create a hybrid race. They want to download their consciousness into the hybrids, thereby continuing themselves. Could this be a quote-unquote replacement for humanity? Could we be in the process of being replaced by aliens and we don't even know about it? Could this be a part of the scam that is being perpetrated by those super rich people who believe in this artificial intelligence and think that they are going to live forever, and they are actually going to be tricked, and in their place are going to be extraterrestrials? Well, it is already happening, whether we want it to or not. More about that later in this podcast. I briefly want to mention Tesla, the inventor of the AC current. He worked with a Canadian. Many people don't know about this. His name was Arthur Matthews, who was a disciple of Tesla. Tesla passed everything on to him, like information about spacecraft and communication devices to communicate with extraterrestrials. Tesla visited Matthews up in Quebec. Matthews was also a contactee by a group of extraterrestrials from Venus. They told Matthews that Tesla was in fact a Venusian baby to be raised as an ordinary human. How many great, quote, men and women, unquote, were extraterrestrials? Colonel Donald Ware, U.S. Air Force retired, passes on this reminder of the time when the star visitors took over a British television program and broadcasted instead an important message for the people of Earth. The transmission occurred on November 26, 1977 at 5:12 p.m. when a strange unknown voice took over, or supermodulated the TV signals from 5 transmitters that were monitored by the Independent Broadcasting Authority, the IBA in England. The IBA did not detect the intrusion. The 5.5-minute message overrode a scheduled newscast read by Ivor Mills on Southern ITV England and was heard by listeners as far away as Andover, London, Newbury, Oxford, Reading, Southampton, and Winchester. IBA engineers at Croydon, Surrey, did not hear the override. And at the main transmitter at Southampton, there was also no evidence of the takeover. A police spokesman told AP and UPI that the message was taken seriously by the population. Quote, they were frightened and generally scared, unquote. The voice spoke slowly and deliberately, with a strange inward authority, calm, serene, never scolding. It said, and I'm going to quote the message in its entirety, quote, this is the voice of Gramaha, the representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years now you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now in peace and wisdom, as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your worlds, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disasters which threaten your worlds and the beings on our worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening. As the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius, the new age can be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only if your rulers are made aware of the evil forces that can overshadow their judgments. Be still now and listen, for your chance may not come again. For many years your scientists, governments, and generals have not heeded our warnings. They have continued to experiment with the evil forces, what you call nuclear energy. Atomic bombs can destroy the earth and the beings of your sister worlds in a moment. The waste from atomic power systems will poison your planet for many thousands of your years to come. We who have followed the path of evolution for far longer than you have long since realized this, that atomic energy is always directed against life. It has no peaceful application. Its use and research into its use must be ceased at once, or you all risk destruction. All weapons of evil must be removed. The time of conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the highest planes of evolution if you show yourselves worthy to do this. You have but a short time to learn to live together in peace and goodwill. Small groups all over the planet are learning this and exist to pass on the light of the dawning new age to you all. You are free to accept or reject their teachings, but only those who learn to live in peace will pass to the higher realms of spiritual evolution. Hear now the voice of Gramaha, the representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. Be aware also that there are many false prophets and guides operating on your world. They will suck your energy from you. The energy you call money will put it to evil ends, giving you worthless dross in return. Your inner divine self will protect you. You must learn to be sensitive to the voice within that can tell you what is truth and what is confusion, chaos, and untruth. Learn to listen to the voice of truth which is within you, and you will lead yourselves on to the path of evolution. This is our message to you, our dear friends. We have watched you growing for many years, as you too have watched our lights in your skies. You know that we are here and that there are more beings on and around your earth than your scientists admit. We are deeply concerned about you and your path towards the light, and will do all we can to help you. Have no fears. Seek only to know yourselves and live in harmony with the ways of your planet Earth. We of the Ashtar Galactic Command thank you for your attention. We are now leaving the planes of your existence. May you be blessed by the supreme love and truth of the cosmos. Unquote. This marks the end of that mysterious transmission. No one ever claimed responsibility, and independent investigations found that the message must have cut into at least 5 transmitters simultaneously, and it evaded detection by monitoring equipment which did not even register an interruption, quote, suggesting it was achieved in some way that bypassed our electrical system, unquote. Of course, something like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds was publicized by Welles right before and after their transmission. However, no one has ever come forward to say they created the Gramaha transmission. This was actually the second message from Gramaha. A month earlier, he had said pointedly that, quote, "We conveyed to Sir John Whitmore and to Dr. Puharich that we would interfere on your radio and television communication systems to relay when the civilizations are coming close to landing on your planet Earth. It is now in motion. We wish you to know that we love you," unquote. That Gramaha would single out the aristocratic former racing champion Whitmore and parapsychologist and MK Ultra researcher Andrija Puharich suggests this was no simple hoax. Both men were deeply involved with a decades-long channeled communication with entities representing a universal hierarchy, sometimes called the, quote, 70 Brotherhoods of the Great White Brotherhood, unquote. The entities governing our reality identified themselves interestingly as the Nine. Another link to Whitmore and Puharich was British author Stuart Holroyd's recently published book, Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, which the two had commissioned as an account of their work with the Nine. It's almost impossible to obtain this book. But however, in this book, Holroyd wrote that the Nine intended to, quote, interrupt television and radio transmissions during the period 18th to 22nd November, unquote. Interestingly, I was in the hospital during this anniversary. I am very fascinated by the Nine. Some say the Nine are the principal 9 Egyptian gods and goddesses. Quote, 9 principles or forces, unquote, are what they call themselves. It took 22 years and Gene Roddenberry for the 9 to reveal themselves as the 9, the great Aeneid of ancient Egypt, Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. The 9 claim that something has gone wrong with humanity's programming. This is very fascinating. And so, therefore, the old gods of Egypt, whose home is Sirius, are returning to reboot us. According to their communications, humanity is supposedly the product of genetically manipulated colonizers whose first civilization arose in Tibet in 32,400 BC. The real issue has never been about UFOs. In other words, the government has never been concerned about the public knowing about UFOs. We've all seen them. The real issue is that the government discovered that UFOs are capable of time travel. They not only can go there, they can go then. Our history has been ruined. I have been saying this for a long time now in previous podcasts, that time basically stopped in the 1970s. We have been living a joke of an existence, a simulacrum since then, meaning joy, truth, and so forth must be actively sought and worked for. It's like digging for gold. They are hidden behind the curtain of this simulacrum. This is why I make these podcasts. This is why for over 30 podcasts I have explained various powerful, esoteric, and occult techniques to empower you. This is why I constantly urge you to get off your couches or computer chairs, and for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, do some work with a capital W. That is the very minimum. For the average man or woman, life is scripted. Coca-Cola, shampoos, rehab, Dolce & Gabbana, Mercedes, sports bars, designer drugs, designer fashions, designer jewelry, 10-year-old whiskey, child pornography, Disney World, Las Vegas, sexual slaves, private jets, chemically laden junk food, vacations to the Caribbean, sporting events, wars, getting drunk, partisan politics, platinum credit cards. Do some or any of these things sound familiar to you? Do you own some of these things? Do you really want to own some of these things? Are you passionate about some of these things? All of these experiences are the show that keep the public distracted and entertained. Quote unquote, give them bread and circuses, as the ancient Roman Empire saying goes. War is the business of the United States. We have a wartime economy. Isn't that true? Just think how many years out of the last 60 years, for example, the United States has been at war. And when we haven't been at war, we have been spending trillions of dollars on bombs and weapons of war, black budget secret programs, or supporting bizarre corporations like Blackwater. They literally siphon trillions of dollars out of the American economy to fund these questionable programs. These black op programs go back to World War II and probably back to the Revolutionary War. Extraterrestrial technology is used for war, but it is not used for the benefit of the American citizen. Easily we could feed the world's hungry, but we prefer to make money off of death. Have we forgotten, thou shalt not kill? And yet, a certain political party wraps themselves in the flag and claims a special relationship with Christianity. I actually had a conversation with a Christian pastor who, to my face, actually said, well, there's many ways to interpret this. There's many ways to interpret this commandment about not killing. The military, I tell you, is into black magic. They do not care how many people they kill. Well, actually, they do care. They want to kill as many people as possible. They are now using killer robots. I kid you not. Great Britain, Israel, and the United States, big surprise, now have killer robots. I am not talking about drones. I am talking about killer robots that make the decision to kill completely independently of any human interaction. Google this and you will see that this is no conspiracy theory. This is an evil reality, and the above-mentioned governments are working on even more sophisticated versions of killer robots. Boy, that sure reminds me of a lot of things. The CIA also kills their own people. Brain cancer is a primary way they do things. Remember William J. Casey, the CIA director, at the time of the Iran-Contra hearings. He was subpoenaed by the United States Congress. Suddenly, he developed brain cancer and died just before he could testify. Consider the visionary Terence McKenna. Living here in Mexico, I have learned so much of how the CIA has destroyed nation after nation, person after person in South America. Living in Mexico allows me to be outside of the quote-unquote fog of U.S. propaganda and helps me to see more clearly. But I love my country, the United States of America. I want it to recover its status as the finest country in the world. But I do not love the corporation that now calls itself the United States. That's bullshit. Many hate and mock Muslims and Islam for what it calls, quote-unquote, jihad. And yet, we conveniently forget the many centuries of inquisitions and crusades during which we butchered evil Muslim men, women, and children. One commentator who was actually in Jerusalem at the time wrote that Muslim blood was knee-deep in the streets in Jerusalem. But that is not even the point. During World War I, and to a certain extent during World War II, Christian slaughtered Christian by the hundreds of millions. No one has the right to disrespect another person's religion. All these things are designed to distract us from knowing what a true human being is capable of, and the reason we are here. I am not preaching Christianity. I am not preaching Islam. I am preaching the religion of human potential. Quote, we have been raised to a height that is unattainable and unimaginable for a natural man, wrote the author of The Prince and the Pauper. We have noticed how the powers, the global elite, must orchestrate negative events in order to instill huge doses of hate and terror into our hearts. We call this negative agenda. Why? Because by nature, humanity is naturally kind, and we are compassionate beings. But our egos tell us we are the greatest beings on earth. In fact, the human beings of today are but a poor reflection of what we once were. We need to remember who we are. We have forgotten. The visitors are reminding us who we are. The answer to this is not simple, as some people retain all their memories. And think about this, just like a university, there are professors, and then there are students. There are graduate candidates, there are administrators, and so on. One good friend of mine, she received downloads in an extraterrestrial classroom for months. Other people can remember past lives going back hundreds of thousands of years. Read the complete and full edition of Hermann Hesse's The Glass Bead Game, the greatest book I have ever read. Other souls do not need to incarnate, but decide to return because of their intense love of humanity, Mother Earth, and all of life. Many wise souls, who we call saints, ascended masters, and so forth, live in the spirit realms, in the spirit planes, working from there, contacting us through dreams, through synchronicities, and giving us instructions on how to become interdimensional beings. And like a school, and as my very, very good friend says, like a love school, some students are, as we say, quote, left back, unquote. Several times during the billions of years of existence of what we call Earth, beings have been separated from the more advanced beings. Go back to previous podcasts, we talk about this. Such a separation is occurring even now. Think about our relationship with our pets. They truly love us, and we love them. This is very similar to the way the higher beings, who some people call angels, relate to us. As we are to our animal friends, so are the angels to us. Eventually, animals will evolve to a human-like existence, and we will be the angels taking care of them. For you special people who have listened all the way to the end of this very long podcast, I want to share some really special and powerful information, especially for you. The ET phenomena is a little like having a big jigsaw puzzle, but with no box with a picture on it, showing what the picture is supposed to look like. Can you imagine what it would have been like for an advanced extraterrestrial to be born into the body of a simple hominid? How do you interface with such a body? Well, we are all extraterrestrials. It was very difficult for me to quote-unquote incarnate in this physical body, and I am assuming that it was and still is difficult for many of you to function in these bodies that we are given. However, the genetic modification of hominids took place a very long time ago. Humanity is very ancient. Author and researcher Michael Cremo talked about evidence contradicting the Darwinian theory of human evolution, footprints that date back millions of years, and dinosaurs coexisting with humans. Looking at the possibility that there were previous advanced civilizations on Earth is not new. The Quran speaks of numerous civilizations existing on the Earth prior to our present era. Quote, they are discovering evidence all over the world up to the present moment, unquote, Cremo said of findings that suggest, quote unquote, modern humans existed in ancient times. He discussed recent reports from Kenya of footprints matching the contemporary human foot found in layers of rock about 1.5 million years old. Now, the Greys are something else entirely. The Greys are frightening, yes. They are not frightening because of the way they look, but because we sense in our souls what they are. They do not have souls. They are biological robots. They are not born but cloned, hatched, or manufactured. We must consider out-of-body experience, OBE research, when we talk about abduction. Now stay with me here. During these out-of-body experiences, a person moves into an astral body realm, which is actually another dimension of existence. This type of quote-unquote travel can have a number of benefits. It can give you verification that consciousness survives outside of the body, and during such states, a person can receive healing energies. Many alien abduction reports may actually be misperceived OBEs. When a person leaves their body, now listen closely, they attract attention from a variety of beings that wish to communicate. When a person leaves their body, they attract attention from a variety of beings that wish to communicate. The notion of form is quite fluid in this realm. Think about this example. It is like dipping your big toe into a pond. The second you put your toe in the pond, every creature in the pond knows something has entered the water. Ancient civilizations were much more subtle than ours. Energetically, they vibrated at a much higher frequency. There is a domain that is faster than light. In fact, according to Dr. William A. Tiller, these cultures, such as Lemuria and Atlantis, would be invisible to us. Also, the great anthroposophist spoke about this. Now, this made me think about alien craft and extraterrestrials and why they are so elusive and hard to pin down. Could it be that the consciousness of these beings and their technology, psychoenergetic consciousness, is vibrating at such a great frequency that only rarely can they be visible? Please read Rudolf Steiner's books. Rudolf Joseph Lorenz Steiner. he spoke about how in the various incarnations of Earth, gradually what was called the human being gradually became visible. We can change the physical world through our intention. You can change your life through your intention. When you create an intention, it is very important to engage your emotion into the work. Feeling is the key. You know it when you feel it. Feeling gives the thrust for what our mind has constructed. And I'm going to tell you another secret now. Many people tell you when you visualize, to visualize yourself as having the thing that you want, the car that you want, or the perfect lover that you want, and to feel all the feelings of what it's like to be driving this car, to smell the new car smell, and so on and so forth. Well, this is the secret. When you start to do this visualization, and yes, visualization is the key, but visualize not the end result. Visualize the process. Visualize how you get there. Start visualizing how you are going to get that car. Start visualizing how you are going to meet that soul mate. Okay? Feeling gives the thrust for what our mind has constructed. Carl Jung revealed this, quote, "Psyche cannot be totally different from matter, for how otherwise could it move matter? And matter cannot be alien to psyche, for how else could matter produce psyche? Psyche and matter exist in the same world, and each partakes of the other. Otherwise, any reciprocal action would be impossible. If research could only advance far enough, therefore, we should arrive at an ultimate agreement between physical and psychological concept. Our present attempts may be bold, but I believe they are on the right lines." Unquote. You want to have a balanced mind. Rise above the waves and walk on the surface of the water. Harmonize yourself. Cleanse yourself. Make yourself as positive as you can. It's a long journey. If the physical body suffers, your spirit will suffer. So take care of your health. Climb your mountain, whatever it may be. Yes, it takes willpower. There are skills which I will share with you in subsequent podcasts, but there is no way of getting around some basic work with a capital W. It has been said that if you devote 1 hour per day studying any subject, you will be an expert in 1 year. Can you spare 1 year out of your entire life, or would you rather waste your time? If you haven't done so already, I ask you to subscribe to my channel. We're talking here about the most important experience in human history. We're talking about the true transformation of the human being, not into a machine, but into a true, activated human being. Subscribe to the place inside. I am Laurence Galian. This is the place inside. Thank you for listening. This ends our transmission for today. We will be in contact soon.